Good morning, everybody. This is Paolo Falcioni speaking, and it is my pleasure to open this first webinar organized by Applia. And we decided to dedicate this first webinar to the European single market. And that alone testifies how important it is for us, this topic, which we will discuss today with a very interesting panel. The single market is a key asset. I would say that it is the key asset that the European Union could build, and it is extremely important to keep it working very well, especially in these unusual times and what will come after these unusual times. It is the single market, the very important engine of the European competitiveness on the global arena. And it is also an important building block for consumer trust in products. Today, we will discuss with the panelists a series of very relevant questions. Which is the way forward for the EU to maintain its competitiveness? Which are the challenges that the European industry faces due to the lack of European harmonization? How valuable it is, the single market, for consumers, and how can the European Union guarantee it remains a key asset of the Union? So with this, I would like to start the series of presentations from different representatives. It will be the industry, the consumer in standardization, the European Commission, Senelec, again, the European Commission, and then we have another industry player to finish the round of presentation. And then in about half an hour, we will start the discussion where I would like to engage all the participants on this. I would like then to first show you the panel that you see on screen right now. And I would start by inviting on the floor Michał Zakrzewski. He is the Smart and Competitiveness Policy Director for Applia, and he will set the scene for sharing the industry perspective. Michał, please.
Thank you, Paolo. Good morning, everyone. I will start with guiding you briefly through the Applia stance on the single market and how we see the current situation and the building blocks, so-called building blocks for the well-functioning single market. So first of all, as Paolo mentioned, we believe that single market is a key achievement of the European Union. And Applia, of course, believes strongly in the new legislative framework principles. That is, the essential requirements defined in the law and technical means how to meet those requirements then prescribed in the European standards. Of course, in order to have it well-functioning, it is essential that harmonized standards, the reference to harmonized standards, are timely listed in the official journal of the EU under respective legislation, granting manufacturers the so-called presumption of conformity. And last but not least, in order to have the system well-functioning, we need a very strong, well-functioning, well-coordinated and effective market surveillance all over Europe. Unfortunately, we see those days a certain gap between the legislation and standards. And in our opinion, this gap is visible very well since 2016 and the famous James Elliott case judgment. For our industry, if the standards are not listed in the official journal, their added value is of much lower stance than the listed standards, for the simple reason the manufacturers cannot enjoy the critical presumption of conformity. But of course, let's discuss in this panel what we can do to improve the situation and how we can save the precious principles of the new legislative framework. So we strongly believe that all stakeholders need to work together with each other. And we'll hear in a moment the interventions of different of those stakeholders that are working together with us on preserving the principles of the new legislative framework. We believe that each of them should complete its tasks as good as possible in a timely manner without creating any unnecessary obstacles. We strongly believe that everyone needs to make an attempt to save the precious principles of the new legislative framework. From Applia's side, to finish my presentation, we believe that maybe one of the means to save the new legislative principles would be even going as far as revising the standardization regulation 1025 from the year 2012 in order to make it possible. But it would be great to hear right now the opinion of the other panelists. How do they see the situation?
Thank you, Michał. Thank you very much for your first statement. I would like to call on stage Chiara Giovannini. She's the Senior Manager Policy and Innovation for ANEC, and ANEC is representing consumers in standardization. Chiara, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very pleased to be here with you, and I'm very honored to discuss a very important aspect for consumers, and the single market has been very successful for consumers so far. Without confident consumers, the single market can't work, because the demand for products and services would not be optimized. Trust and confidence, online and offline. This is what the single market and a healthy single market should be about. And trust and confidence are what standards can do for consumers, but it sets the bar very high, because the expectations are very high, and trust is deserved, not earned. The resilient industrial ecosystems, in our view, are based on a healthy and balanced relationship between the offer of products and services and the consumer needs. Safety is a consumer need, and goods have been required to be safe for more than 25 years in the single market. We use standards to show the compliance with the legal requirements. But there are new consumer needs. And one example is accessibility. This is not the case yet, but it will be soon, because we know that standards can deliver accessibility, and we will have a new legislation using standards for accessibility. This is the Accessibility Act. There is also a new consumer need, and this is linked to the connected products, to the digitalization. We believe that the use of standards can help secure products and avoid that consumers are misled by algorithms, for example. But we need the supporting legislation to be amended to make it an essential requirement for products to be secure and safe before being placed on the market. We welcome yesterday Council conclusions about cybersecurity, which are going in this direction. And if consumers are to play the central role that we know they can play in the green transition, we need to also reduce the environmental impacts of products at the design phase. Again, standardization and the legislation linked to standards can play a role here, but we need new sustainability legislation and product standards to help consumers make sustainable choices. We also need someone to police the market, to make consumers safe and secure by withdrawing dangerous and non-compliant products. We see that 30 years after the introduction of the new approach, the legislative technique of the new approach, with the use of harmonized standards, we still have a rather under-resourced and fragmented market surveillance system. We hope that the new market surveillance regulation entering into force next year will improve this situation. Despite the horrible consequences of the health crisis we are living in, standards are proving key to protect society in emergency situations, and they can continue to do so in the new normal ahead of us. An inclusive European standardization system where all stakeholders can participate and can they have their voice heard is, of course, a prerequisite for such a role of standards. So to conclude, a market is based on demand and offer. Consumer trust is at the heart of the demand side. By deserving and ensuring this trust, the market can have a positive impact on society at large and the environment. We have the regulatory and technical tools for this to happen, and we need to keep them updated to meet the new needs and expectations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Chiara. Very clear. And I think there are a number of already interesting points for discussion later on. Thank you for that. Then after Chiara, I would invite on the floor Radek Mali. He's the head of unit for standardization in DG GROW in the European Commission. And I look forward to your presentation, Radek. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paolo. Good morning to everyone. Thank you very much for having me. So let me try to give you rapidly the Commission point of view from the standardization angle, because then my colleague Claudia will be able to give you a little bit broader perspective. But let's speak about how standardization is crucial for the single market. I would argue that there are two key ways how standardization is important for the single market. We can go to the next slide, please. So first and foremost, standardization is a market tool. It ensures interoperability. It ensures market access for all producers. It ensures innovation, competitiveness of our industry. We have to remember and remind ourselves constantly that about 80% or perhaps even slightly more of all European standards out there are market-driven purely and only, have nothing to do with regulation, with legislation, and are as such extremely important still for the industry. The very unique feature of the European system, whereby once we have a European standard, this replaces 27 and more conflicting standards across the EU and creates much more unified market, is extremely important. Next to this, standardization also serves as an important legislative tool. This is because it provides support for EU legislation where the EU decides to legislate, harmonize legislation. This is only about 20, perhaps a little bit less than 20% of total standards. So standards are used for regulation. This is not unique in the world. Standards are used for regulatory purposes, but the way we do it in Europe is really unique. This is not the US system whereby you would have competing standards from competing industrial companies trying to be quoted in the legislation. Neither this is the Chinese system, for instance, where we have heavy-handed state intervention and involvement in the whole system. The European system is based on consensus, co-regulation, high degree of inclusiveness, and importantly, on a public-private partnership system, which I will still mention shortly. So this is a system which empowers the industry. Nowhere else in the world, I think, the industry has such a direct impact on regulatory issues as we have in Europe, and also it gives extra protection to consumers, since we are discussing consumer issues here, by being so strongly inclusive. If we can go to the next slide, please. The fact that, as I said, we have a unique and uniquely successful, I would claim, system does not mean that there are no challenges. Indeed, we have challenges, and I would even argue that some of the challenges to a large extent are inherent to the public-private partnership between the regulator and the industry private sector that we have here. Certainly the first one, when we look at the three that I list there, we have a long-standing discussion about division of roles and responsibilities in our public-private system partnership. The Commission, on the one hand, has been criticized by the industry for a long time for being too intrusive, too meddling with the system, not leaving the industry enough freedom to decide things that are essentially market related. On the Commission side, at the same time, you could hear strong voices inside of the Commission that the industry should really understand better its co-responsibilities coming from the fact that industry becomes a co-regulator and therefore has broader responsibilities than just market-driven ones. There are broader societal responsibilities put on the industry by the system, and this should be better understood. The other challenge that we have is to do with the speed and efficiency of the system. We are living in a market situation whereby everything is speeding up all the time. The technological progress becomes incredibly fast, and many people, many stakeholders feel that the system is not quick and lean and reactive enough to be able to not only react but drive this change as well. This is something that we have to focus on. The Commission is criticizing the Commission. The industry is criticizing the Commission again for being rather slow in its assessment and adoption procedures and in its bureaucracy. I have to say we listen to this criticism very carefully and try to assess very critically what we can do, how we can improve our systems to become faster and within the limitations of the system more responsive to the needs of the market and of the legislation. But again, like in all the other challenges, I would say the issue is not only on the Commission or regulator side. There's also issues to do with the system in the ESOs. I have some slides perhaps later for the discussion which I can show. There are lengthy bureaucratic procedures on both sides when we look at the standardization organizations and when we look at the Commission, and perhaps there is a lot that we can do by working together and trying to limit the time that we jointly take to push the standards through. Thirdly, I should also mention the fast-changing international environment. This is not something that will be surprising to most of you. I think here, the issue is that we are no longer living in what we could call the innocent, the 1990s, early 2000s, whereby everybody was very happy to get in the market and everybody believed that the whole world basically shares the same values. We are seeing increasingly over recent years that this is not so much the case. The world is becoming, and the international market is becoming much more protectionist. With the last still current U.S. administration being a very good example of this, but then also we have the case of China, which is becoming more and more which is more and more aggressively pushing its both market, economic, and political interests globally. So in this environment and in this setting, standards are becoming more than ever political and strategic as well as market tool, and we have to all understand this and try to react to this and involve ourselves in a discussion how to react to a situation like this. So we have a lot of challenges, as I said, in our system, and we need to respond to these challenges. I list here only 2 bullet points because there's not much time. This could be for much more discussion, but if I sum up rapidly, we need to collectively invest much more in the system. Again, this is for both sides. On the Commission side, we have been focusing on this a lot over the recent years. We have introduced this new system of harmonized standards consultants that should ensure much more upstream coordination with the industry, with these standardizers, and to make sure that there's smoother citation of standards downstream. We are investing also internally in the Commission, trying to shift more resources towards standardization across different sectors in the Commission. We are providing more training to colleagues so that they understand the needs. And I would claim that we have increasingly results. When you look, and again, I have slides that we can sort of look at later during the discussion. Over the recent years, we see that we are increasingly citing more and more standards in the official journal. We are becoming faster in the procedure. We also have fewer and fewer rejections of the standards coming to us from the standardization organizations. I would claim that this is thanks to the involvement of the HAS consultants. So we have resources, but we should not sleep on the laurels, as it is said, and we need to continue and push further, because there is still much to do. And beside this, we need to importantly continue cooperation, continue dialogue, because we have public-private partnership. We need to speak about these challenges and see how to address them. And we always have to address them together, because if we try to do something on one-sided, it's not going to work. So opportunities like this to discuss with you here are extremely important, extremely valuable. And I would basically conclude saying that we have to try to make sure that we do not put our system in danger, because it's too good and too valuable to be exposed to this. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Radek. And your speech actually introduces very well Andrea Gulasci, representing Sensenelec, so the European Standardization Organization, and she's the Director of Governance and Partnership, and she will tell us like the role of ESOs in this entire discussion. Please, Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Paolo, and Applia as well for organizing this very timely webinar. I'm happy to join a very varied panel of speakers on a very important topic for all of us, the single market and of course, European standardization. I think you can all see my slides. Yes, perfectly. So next slide, please. We all like to say in the standardization world that standards are really the invisible engine of the single market. And for the single market to work efficiently, we need an engine that also works very smoothly. And I know a lot of you are very familiar with European standards. However, for the purpose of the discussion today, I wanted to highlight and draw the attention to some of the key added values of standards and why standards are crucial in supporting the single market that we all want to see strive and continue to grow. They ensure the safety and quality of products. Standards contribute to the removal of barriers to trade. Standards provide state-of-the-art solutions with technical expertise, but they also enable the deployment of innovation. And particularly in the current context, where we're talking very much about the twin transitions, and we're looking at the success of the Green Deal and the digital agenda for Europe, standards will play an even more crucial and important role. And I think that's something we should keep in mind in looking forward on how to make the system work more efficiently for the benefit of the European Union and the single market. Next slide, please. The European standardization system is it's a very solid system. It's a system that has been going on strong for many, many years. This year, we celebrated 60 years of SEN and Senelec as organizations being the counterpartner, if you want, of ISO and IEC at an international level. We have a system that is embedded on the national delegation principle. And I mention this because it's a unique characteristic of the European standardization system. Through this national delegations system, we have the possibility and we have the obligation, if you want, to include the widest possible stakeholder participation in standards, which maybe justifies or maybe contributes a bit to the lengthy process that Radek was mentioning as well. But on the other hand, it also ensures that absolutely every voice concerned about a particular standard is heard and has the possibility to contribute to the standardization system as well. Radek also mentioned the international dimension, and I fully agree. We cannot dissociate anymore the regional standardization efforts and the leadership of different regions. And I think it's becoming very apparent that Europe is very much part of a fast global race, if we want to call it like that, an economic race. and the importance of exploiting European standardization, and particularly as well the agreements that SEN and SENELEC have with ISO and IEC, the importance or the facilitation that we have of positioning European industry and European stakeholders to lead international standardization discussions. This is something that very much deserves attention and deserves a concerted effort for us to exploit and be aware of. Next slide, please. I mentioned that this invisible engine of the single market that we consider standardization to be is really the value of standardization is to facilitate, is to offer a cost-efficient and easier way to show product compliance with union law. I want to draw the attention as well to the fact that we just adopted last week our next strategy for the next decade, Strategy 2030, which outlines very clearly that we want to build a trusted and a stronger relationship with the European regulators, which focuses very much on the stakeholder needs, on the consumer needs, on the sustainable development goals. So we are looking at a new era for standardization. It's true, the economy, the market, the consumer needs are changing. We cannot anymore distinguish or make very clear and separate. We cannot look into silos. We need to be very much aware of the digital impact, of the economic impact. So having as an underlying basis, a new legislative framework with clearly defined roles and responsibilities that is fully functional, that is efficient, that is exploited to its best capacity is key to make sure that we can devote the necessary efforts and the necessary time to produce standards that are very valuable for the future of Europe. This way, by having a new legislative framework that is in place, we will avoid creating new practices which would cause confusion in the marketplace and will impact, of course, our industry very much, but also create a mistrust of consumers that Chiara mentioned. So I think that is something that will deserve attention today, and I look forward to the exchange and the discussion. And I think it's something that is at the core of how successful the European standardization model has been, and that is something where we should take onwards in the next decade. Next slide, please. Now, of course, there are many success stories. Radek mentioned already the harmonized standards, and on both sides, there are, on all three sides, industry standardizers and regulators, we are making efforts to get the blockage working, and of course every party needs to take its own responsibilities, and there is a constructive continuous dialogue happening, and this is something that we hope will be reinforced in the year to come. I think this year has put standardization completely in the spotlight, not only through the German presidency that has stressed some of the issues that are ongoing and that should be solved, but also through the pure role that standards have played for fighting the pandemic, the standards that have been made available to enable this change of production chains, the mask, the guidance for artisanal masks, where ANEC has also highly contributed. So I think we need to put also standards in the context of what is their role, what is their benefit, and how can we make standardization as a success story. I will skip the next slide, which is a concrete example, which I'm sure many of the APLIA members and many of the participants today are familiar with, to conclude, if you want, and go into the opportunities and challenges that we have ahead. I think the opportunity is here to take what we have, to look into the new legislative framework, to look into the public-private partnership we have, and make it work, and make it stronger, and make it work to the benefit of our industry, of our SMEs, of our society, and of course the policymakers. It's a system that works. It's a system that maybe needs a bit of revision, needs a bit of improvement here and there, but it's a system that we need to exploit further. We also should be very clear and very strong about the benefits of the new legislative framework. And we have seen a potential challenge and a worrying shift of maybe neglecting or ignoring the new legislative framework in new legislative proposals. And I think that's something that deserves attention and deserves a bit of an alert from both sides. And of course, we are looking at an opportunity of making Europe more competitive on the global market. And I think this is what Radek mentioned as well, that the role of standards on the international, in the international landscape is something that is very important. There are challenges along the way as well, and I know we're all affected by them. We all work towards them. Michelle mentioned at the very beginning, I think, the unspoken, the spoken James Elliott case, but we are also in the middle of the Blue Guide revision. Yesterday, we have submitted together with ETSI, which is the third standardization organization, our comments to the roadmap on the new legislative framework. And of course, the challenge that encompasses all this is the fact that Europe is on the path of recovery. We have a difficult few years ahead of us. We need to be resilient, sustainable, digital, be ready to take on challenges that are coming at us very fast. And I think by having a strong standardization system, a strong new legislative framework will enable us to do that. My last slide is looking forward. Of course, this is the purpose of the webinar today as well, is to have a constructive dialogue, is to have an exchange between the different parties on how can we move on forward and make solutions or find solutions that we need. As I mentioned, the goal one of our strategy is focused on building this trustworthy, stronger partnership with the European regulators. We have had a lot of common efforts, and Radek mentioned some of them that are working towards to improve. We had the joint initiative on standardization. We're having key performance indicators shared with the Commission too. And Radek mentioned as well that there is an increase in the citation as well, which we very much welcome and something that we want to see continue. There is a continuous dialogue in place between industry, between societal stakeholders, the standardization organizations and regulators that we want to see intensify under the Portuguese presidency as well, to not lose the momentum we have built in the last 6 months last year. And in particular, with regards to this faster delivery of standards and faster citation of standards, I think it is worth it to mention here as well the informal talks at this stage that we have with Director Kirstin Jorna from DG GROW on really establishing a task force and opening the discussion of looking into the future on how can we, by maybe thinking outside the box, how can we have and ensure a timely delivery and citation of European standards. So to conclude, I think we all want a fully functional European standardization system that supports the European policy objectives. And we all want a single market that is competitive on the global era. So I look forward to the discussion and the exchange with the panelists and the participants later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andreas, for your comprehensive presentation. And it is now the time to listen from Claudia Martinez Felix, and she's the Deputy Head of Unit in B1, dealing with the free movement of goods, which is an extremely important aspect of the single market. And Claudia, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, everyone. Many thanks for the invitation and many thanks for the already very interesting presentations that we have heard this morning. And I'm also looking forward for the exchanges afterwards. So my presentation will be short. I would focus mainly from the perspective of the challenges that we are having ahead of us, and also the ongoing. It's not revision because we are just evaluating the new legislative framework. But I have heard already. And next slide, please. A lot of points made on the importance that the new legislative framework, the new approach, is bringing for the single market, for consumers, for enterprises. And I will just indeed hold on, because I see that I didn't start my video. So you can see my face. Here it is. So what I was, next slide, please. What I would just confirm is that we do see the new legislative framework and the new approach as a very successful regulatory framework, and that we have all of us an interest to ensure that it is being kept with the same principles, and I will briefly refer to them, despite the new challenges that we are facing today with the new priorities that the Commission and globally the planet is setting itself. I'm talking about the twin transition. We were talking about the challenges that the priority on reaching all the climate change goals is putting not only on the industry that needs to follow, but also on testing our current regulatory framework, whether it is fit for purpose. I mean, let's not forget that the objectives are pretty high in terms of product sustainability requirements, of waste, of making our industry more sustainable, our products more sustainable, but not only here in the single market, but also as Radek and others were pointing globally. There is more and more needs to ensure that the third countries and markets are actually receiving well also our new, let's say, more green products, and also our high standards on sustainability and so on. So coming back to what we believe are the principles that are important and remain essential for the current evaluation of the new legislative framework. I mean, we are all clear that it is important that all union legislation has very clear roles for manufacturers and for the different economic operators, including importers and distributors, and therefore it is very important that we clarify well when and what products are considered as substantially modified, and to what extent remanufacturing, refurnishing is well understood by all of us, and what are then for the different standards that may be needed to that end, and when then new responsibilities come, also when it applies to new conformity assessment procedures and models. So as you know, the legislation as we have it today foresees basically essential requirements. So foresees the safety, for example, aspects that need to be achieved by using, for example, standards that we were talking earlier before, harmonized standards being of a voluntary nature. I mean, these are principles that are set up in the new legislative framework and which, in our view, remain very valid and remain the pillars of the single market for harmonized products. And therefore, it is important that we keep a framework that also maintains the very valid element, the presumption of conformity that Michael was mentioning earlier on, and which allows then industry to ensure that whenever they are testing their products according to listed harmonized standards, there is this presumption of conformity, which is then well taken note by also market surveillance authorities when testing their products. As you know, the new legislative framework contains a number of requirements as well for the competences of notified bodies, for an important role for the accreditation system, which is not made mandatory at this stage, and also foresees a number of provisions to ensure that the role of the market surveillance authorities is properly achieved, and notably with the new market surveillance regulation that will be starting to apply as was already mentioned next year, we will ensure with the creation, the setup of the union, the EU PCN, the Union Product Compliance Network, coordinated and much more efficient, in our view, policy on market surveillance. And that's something which is part of these efforts to reinforce the new approach and the way the regulatory framework is being set up today. Also, the new approach has, of course, references to the CE marking and the labeling that it is foreseen there to ensure that the product is complying with the essential requirements, and that is also something that we will need to ensure that the requirements that are foreseen today for example, a fixing of the CE marking remain valid, also in line of these new challenges that we were discussing earlier on, the twin technology. But next slide, please. I mean, when we look at the challenges, as I was mentioning, the twin tech, the digital and the greening transformation that the Commission is been putting forward as clear priorities for the next 5-6 years, and not only but for the next 20 and 30 years. If again we look at the commitments we've done by 2050 to be completely climate neutral, it means indeed that we need to see how we ensure that industry has enabling legislation to put forward more green products, and notably that is the challenges that we see today, also in relation to our regulatory framework, is to what extent, for example, we do have, as I said, the definitions that stand today when it comes to obligations for economic operators, for example, if they still stand, and that is particularly the case for, as I was saying, this increased push for refashioning products, for the additional updated softwares and physical repairs and modifications of the products, because they need to be more interconnected. They need to be fit as well in terms of risks which may not be coming from the changes that the manufacturer may introduce, or which might be, outsourced to a third contractor, but may also come from externalized risks, being it was mentioned before, cybersecurity. So those are the challenges that we see in products, and which need to be adequately translated into the new legislative framework. And to that extent, this is, and next slide, what we are aiming at doing in 2-3 different ways today, which is basically launching the revision of the new legislative framework that has been done. Well, as I said, it's not a revision, it's an evaluation. So that has been done recently with the publication of a roadmap, and we have already received many contributions. We thank a lot all the industry that has already made very valid points, which we are analyzing. The idea again is to ensure that we first of all understand very well what are the issues that the industry is facing with the current regulatory framework. And I mean, here you have a few questions in my presentation which are already reflecting the thinking that the Commission is doing internally. So I mean, do we need to change the notion of product? When do we have a substantial change in a product that makes it actually become a new product, and therefore needs to be tested again with new, possibly conformity assessment module if need be? What about the affixing of the CE marking? I mean, are there other ways of ensuring that it needs to be, only physically in the product? Could, for example, we envisage that this sort of CE marking information and the compliance and the whole documentation for conformity, does it need to be also, for example, available only if the product has a screen, then accessible also online in the product itself. Goods, then also the notified bodies as they stand today, and the requirements that are foreseen for ensuring that the notified bodies that are producing, that are providing services in terms of testing the products, do they need to be revised, reinforced, clarified? Do you also sense that the accreditation system as it is foreseen today is sufficiently robust? Does it meet the expectations for notified bodies and for the notified bodies testifying your products? Does also, in your view, the single market as it stands today have the sufficient elements to actually provide solutions in situations of emergencies as we are being impacted today with COVID and the pandemic? And finally, do you consider also that the models foreseen in the new legislative framework are sufficiently, for conformity assessment, are sufficiently adequate? Would you see a need for any amendments in relation to the different models of conformity assessment and with the third-party conformity assessment, with the use of the self-declaration by the manufacturers for low-risk products, etc.? Next slide. So these are the questions that we're looking at. As I said, we are, of course, evaluating the new legislative framework. There is also the revised Blue Guide on the harmonized rules for products by mid-21, for which we have already received quite substantive comments and contributions. In that regard, the Blue Guide, well, APLIA has sent a very interesting contribution. This does all overall be complemented, as I was mentioning before, by the efforts that the Commission is undertaking to better implement the already adopted market surveillance regulation, which certainly will provide the right tools for market surveillance authorities to even do better their job, to ensure that only compliant and safe products are placed in the market. And with that, I finish my presentation. I thank you all.
Thank you, Claudia. Very, very interesting presentation. I will move on now to Alex Eisenberg. He's from one member company of APLIA, and he's the head of office dealing with the EU technical market access. Alex, please, the floor is yours.
Hello, thank you very much. Good morning. For transparency, BSH is BSH Home Appliances. We are a member of the Home Appliance division of Bosch. And we're talking about challenges. I now have the challenge to be much quicker, to have some time for discussion. So let's immediately dig in the next slide. Allow me to use a metaphor about what I want to talk about here, with the EU as a ship. And we talked about an engine. If you think of that, I think it helps a bit, because the ship's going to bring us about the vast ocean. We are all on the same boat. And the single market is the engine. And what is important about such an engine, you could imagine very well, is two things. It's usually very complex, an engine of such a boat. And everyone benefits of that, but only if you know how it works. And even the one who knows about one part don't necessarily know about the other part. I think that's a bit helpful, because if we want to dig into the engine, or let's say into the single market, next slide, please. We think, I mean, the single market is a really big thing. We focus today on free movement of goods, but we have also persons and services. But well, so in the single market, the NLF is a big thing. And there's market surveillance enforcement, very important. But we focus in there on standardization and regulation. then if you dig in there, we discussed, and you other panelists said it already, the balance about standardization and regulation. It's very important. And the important link in our view is really the listing of the standards in the official journal giving presumption of conformity. So this is this little tiny thing. And at this point, we really believe that the motor is a bit sputtering here. It's because not everything is listed what it should be, even though we appreciate there are many standards listed. Well, if you are touched by the ones which are not listed, it doesn't help. So not all is listed, and the process effectively has slowed down. And what the message here is it's very important to recall that listed standards are really good for Europe. It's not only that standards are there, harmonized, that's already great, even if 80% are not even used for listing, but listed standards are good. More listed is better than less. We can talk about that later. And we think, as I said, the process is a bit sputtering, could be done better. What could we do better? Next slide, please. Is on this level, you might think, oh, well, that's pretty much blah, blah. But of course, it's more deep than this. The most important thing is the top one, I think. We should really work together to have as many standards listed as possible. And you all know that usually one tends to say, well, it wasn't actually me. This one commission, standardization industry has done something wrong. That doesn't really help. If you are on that ocean and your boat has stalled, it doesn't matter who has forgotten the oil. You have to make the thing running. And the 3 key points here, that's only the headlines. If you want to read more, use the link below. That's the APLIA white paper, which elaborates a bit more on that, is transparency, speed, and operational excellence. And I only give you here an example for each of them to start the discussion. For transparency, we talked about roles, but not everyone is a specialist as we are. It's important that the roles of industry, of standardizers, of the consultants, of the commission are transparent. The CCMC could be a help to be also more transparent in what they do. In speed, a simple thing I know from, I've been working in development for a long time, is to set targets. Just agree on time limits would already help. The 1025-2012 regulation doesn't really say so, but who keeps us all of agreeing on certain time targets? And operational excellence is also a big word, but what I want to say here is we really need practical things, what we could do. One example would be, if the rules how to formalize standardization requests are agreed on, even informally, it would help. Or the rules for rejection, that would help. So these are things that are more elaborated below. And I think that is hopefully enough for today and for now to start a discussion. And I'm happy to do so. And also, I'm very happy that this webinar currently has exactly this atmosphere of working together and saying what we can do instead of saying what somebody else hasn't done. Yeah, then let's start the discussion.
Thank you, Alex. Could I invite all panelists to show their video? I'm stopping the sharing so that we can get a better view. And I would invite all participants to express their question. There is a Q&A button that you can use in order to fire your questions. And then we can answer, and I will relay the questions to the panelists. In waiting for questions to come, by listening to you all, I noted a few key underlining issues. The one that I would start, it is excellence. And it was mentioned by Alex. We all have to be excellent in what we do. Could I have an example from each of the panelists about what would you consider being excellent in your field? Who is willing to start with this? Chiara, can I get you, please?
Yes, with great pleasure. For us, excellence has a double meaning. It's the excellence of the level of consumer protection of each standard in terms of content, technological excellence, and in the process that led to the adoption of the standard. And this is both in case of harmonized standard, we have a legislative process, we have an administrative process, and then we have a standardization process. This is what we strive to. As consumer representatives, you know that we have a very high level of expectations of both our legislators, our administrators, and our industry. And as consumers, we think we contribute at the same level in the interest of all society.
Thank you, Chiara. Radek, what does it mean to be excellent from your standpoint?
Well, there are many things I could pick up on. When I go back to the challenges that I presented in my short presentation, perhaps I could pick the need to be faster in processing of harmonized standards. This is something that is very much on our mind. We have actually taken some time to go through the standards that have been processed over the last 3 years and measure the time needed for various adoption procedures, both on the side of the ESOs and on our side. And I can tell you that together we take something like 18 months altogether on average to make sure from the moment that the standard becomes available to technical committees to the moment that the Commission publishes the reference to it in the official journal. We spend something like 18 months. So for me, excellence would be, let's say, to have this time. I understand, certainly on the Commission side, and I imagine on the side of standardizers, there is need to process these things, and so you cannot avoid and completely eliminate a degree of bureaucracy. But I think with sort of joint work, more investment into the system, we could really try to attempt to have this time.
Andrea, your time to define what does it mean to be excellent.
Thank you, Paolo. This is like our Christmas wish list, isn't it now? I think for us, excellent standards will, of course, be standards that reflect all the voices, that are inclusive, that deliver on time, as Radek said as well, that are cited timely as well, so that the industry can thrive, and that can also position Europe on the global stage.
Okay, very good. Claudia, what does it mean to be excellent from your standpoint?
I think what I would portray is the ambition from the Commission side to ensure that any revision, any new requirement that could, for example, require additional efforts, cost on industry when it comes to ensuring the compliance of their products to the new priorities set by the Commission, then safety aspects, ensuring risks, as I was mentioning, on cybersecurity, etc. That every step that the Commission needs to undertake, it's truly exposed to exchange with the industry, that it is discussed, that we can take the viewpoint of all the interested parties, and that's part of the better regulation toolkit we have in the Commission, and that's something we would definitely encourage to follow for any important revision if that may affect at the end industries like yours and the competitiveness of the industry at the end in the single market as well, and also globally. Hence, in my view, that's why a big call to everyone to contribute as much as possible to all the ongoing open public consultations that we are undertaking. Thank you.
Excellent. And we have 1 minute left before closing. And instead of me driving and drawing the conclusion, I would ask each of you to say like one word because that's the time you have, as your own conclusion. And I will go in the order of panelists' intervention. So Michał, your word to conclude this seminar.
Respond fastly on any shortcoming of the standards and work on the basis of facts, not on the emotions and not on the fake news.
Excellent. Chiara?
A single market delivering trust for consumers. We have the legislative and the technical tools. We need to update them.
Radek? I think you are muted still.
Oh, excuse me. I was going to say my one word would be together.
Together. Excellent. Andrea?
Well, Chiara already mentioned trust. I think ours is very much as well a trustworthy and efficient public-private partnership.
Is the trust. Claudia?
I would say ensuring enforcement of our EU rules, which are adequate and updated.
Excellent. Alex?
Well, one word would be excellent. One sentence would be, because the webinar is not bad, one sentence is, let's jointly work together to get as many standards listed as needed.
Excellent. And that brings us to the conclusion of the workshop. We are right at 11. I know that there are questions waiting, but we do not have time to discuss those. What I would suggest it is that we take the questions and we try to elaborate an answer by involving also the panelists. This is the time for me to thank you, all the panelists, all the attendees. I enjoyed very much this discussion, and I look forward to the next steps to increase and improve the European effectiveness through the use of the single market. Thank you very much and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.